The settlement check had $750,000 written on it, but all Savannah Reed could see was the price of keeping her dignity. She sat in the law office, 23 floors above downtown Miami, watching the city shimmer through floor-to-ceiling windows. The same city where she'd grown up in a two-bedroom apartment with bars on the windows. The same city where her mother worked 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. The same city where Preston Academy stood like a fortress of privilege. Its gates designed to keep people like her out, unless they were smart enough to be useful. "Miss Reed," the lawyer's voice pulled her back. "You need to sign here, here, and initial here." Savannah picked up the Mont Blanc pen, probably worth more than her mother made in a week, and paused. 6 years. It had taken 6 years to get to this moment. 6 years since that September morning when she'd first walked through Preston Academy's gates, clutching her scholarship letter like a life preserver. The pen hovered over the signature line. In the reflection of the polished conference table, she could still see the ghost of that 17-year-old girl. The one who believed that being smart was enough. The one who thought merit mattered more than money. The one who didn't know that chocolate milk could change everything. "Take your time," the lawyer said gently. Catherine Torres had been the only attorney willing to take the case when everyone else saw the Whitman name and suddenly had full schedules. "I know this brings up a lot." Savannah almost laughed. A lot. Such a small phrase for what had happened. Such a tiny container for all that rage and humiliation and fear and unexpectedly triumph. She signed her name with deliberate strokes. Savannah Nicole Reed. Each letter a small rebellion. Each curve a quiet victory. "That's it then," Catherine said, sliding the check across the table. "The scholarship fund will be established within 60 days. The Reed Legal Defense Fund for Academic Equality. Has a nice ring to it. And the other terms, all binding. Preston Academy's new admission policies go into effect next semester. The federal investigation into the Whitmans continues regardless of this settlement. And Jake," Catherine's smile was sharp as a blade, "Jake Whitman's name is mud at every Ivy League institution, from here to Boston." Savannah folded the check carefully, tucking it into her purse next to her MIT student ID, 23 years old and already graduating with a double major in computer science and pre-law. Funny how things worked out. "Thank you," she said, standing. "For everything." "Thank you," Catherine countered, "for not giving up. For fighting when everyone said you should just transfer schools and forget it happened. For proving that sometimes, just sometimes, David actually can beat Goliath." As Savannah waited for the elevator, she caught her reflection in the brass doors. Professional blazer, neat bun, minimal makeup. She looked nothing like the girl who'd stood on that assembly stage 6 years ago. Chocolate milk dripping down her white dress while 300 students watched. But underneath the polished exterior, she was still the same person who'd made a decision that changed everything. The elevator dinged. As the doors slid open, her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Proud of you, baby. Dad would have been too." Savannah smiled a real smile, not the careful one she'd perfected during depositions. Her father had died when she was 12, leaving behind nothing but debt and a fierce belief that education was the only inheritance that couldn't be taken away. He'd been right about that, even when they tried to take it, even when they used every weapon in their arsenal. Her education had remained hers. The elevator descended smoothly, carrying her back down to earth. But her mind drifted backward, to where it all really began. Not in that assembly hall, not even with Jake's first bribe attempt. No, It began the day she got her acceptance letter to Preston Academy. Her mother had cried when the thick envelope arrived. Full academic scholarship to the most prestigious prep school in Florida. Tuition, books, uniforms, even a laptop all covered. "My baby's going to make it," she'd whispered, clutching Savannah tight. "You're going to have everything I couldn't give you." If only they'd known that everything included lessons she'd never wanted to learn. The first day at Preston had felt like stepping into another universe. Savannah had taken 3 buses to get there, starting at 5:30 in the morning. She'd watched through the window as the neighborhoods transformed from bars on windows to iron gates, from strip malls to boutiques, from survival to excess. Preston Academy looked like a small college campus. Red brick buildings with white columns, manicured lawns that stayed impossibly green even in Florida's punishing heat. A parking lot full of cars worth more than houses in her neighborhood. She'd stood at the entrance, gripping her new backpack bought on sale at Target, but she'd carefully removed the tag and almost turned around. But she didn't, because Reed women didn't run. The scholarship students were easy to spot. They moved differently, careful, alert, like prey animals who'd wandered into a predator's territory. There were 12 of them in a student body of 800. 12 kids who had to score in the 99th percentile just to be considered. While legacy students like Jake Whitman just had to exist. She'd noticed Jake immediately. How could she not? He moved through the hallways like he owned them, which, considering his father had donated the new science wing, maybe he did. Tall, blonde, with the kind of casual confidence that came from never having to wonder if you belonged. He was beautiful in that specific way that wealth cultivated: perfect teeth, perfect skin, perfect everything that money could buy. For the first 2 years, they'd existed in parallel universes within the same school. Savannah kept her head down, maintained her 4.0, and ignored the whispers about her off-brand clothes and public bus commute. Jake continued being Jake, tennis captain, student council, the kind of golden boy whose future was mapped out before he could walk. The collision happened junior year, in the chemistry lab after school. Savannah had been working on her AP Chem project, so focused on her titration that she didn't hear the door open. "You're Savannah Reed." She'd looked up to find Jake leaning against the lab bench. Designer backpack slung over one shoulder. Up close, she could see why girls wrote his name on bathroom stalls, but she could also see something else, a calculating look in his blue eyes, like he was measuring her worth. "Yes, I have a proposition for you, even now, 6 years later." Savannah could still taste the copper tang of blood from biting her tongue so hard. A proposition, like she was a business deal, like her integrity had a price tag. "I'm listening," she'd said carefully, adding another drop to her solution. "I need help with my coursework. My schedule's packed with tennis. I'm being scouted by Yale. It's a legacy thing. You wouldn't understand." He'd pulled out his wallet then, designer leather that probably cost more than her mother's monthly rent. $500 per assignment, cash. No one needs to know. The solution in her beaker turned bright pink, perfect endpoint. She'd recorded the measurement in her lab notebook with steady hands before looking up at him. "No. No!" He'd actually looked shocked, like the word was foreign to him. "I can go higher. $750, $1,000 for major projects." I said no. Everyone has a price. Reed, what's yours? That's when she'd made her first mistake. She'd let him see her anger. Let him see that his casual assumption that she could be bought had hit a nerve deeper than he could imagine. My boyfriend, she'd said slowly, knows exactly what we're worth. And it's not measured in how many essays we write for spoiled boys who think daddy's money makes them special. His face had flushed dark red. Your kind, the kind who earn what we have, the kind who know that a 4.98 GPA means something when you achieve it yourself, the kind who understand that integrity isn't for sale, even when the buyer thinks he owns everything else. She'd turned back to her experiment, dismissing him. Another mistake. Jake Whitman wasn't used to being dismissed, especially not by scholarship students who were supposed to be grateful for the opportunity to breathe the same rarefied air. You'll regret this, he'd said quietly. Too quietly. I doubt it. The door had slammed behind him hard enough to rattle the beakers. Savannah had finished her experiment, cleaned up methodically, and caught the 5:48 bus home. It wasn't until she was walking up the 3 flights to their apartment that she'd realized her hands were shaking. That night, she'd started recording everything. It was her mother who'd given her the idea, indirectly. They'd been watching the news, another story about workplace harassment, and her mother had shaken her head. These days, baby, you need receipts for everything. People lie, but recordings don't. Florida was a one-party consent state. As long as one person in a conversation knew it was being recorded, that person being Savannah, it was perfectly legal. She'd bought a small digital recorder with her babysitting money and started keeping it in her pocket. The harassment began small. So small, she almost wondered if she was imagining it. Her locker would be sticky with something honey, syrup, always something that attracted ants. Her textbooks would go missing from her desk when she went to the bathroom. Her carefully packed lunches would disappear from the shared fridge. Accidents happen, the vice principal had said when she'd reported it. Perhaps you should be more careful with your belongings. But Savannah had grown up in a neighborhood where you learned to recognize patterns of aggression. This wasn't carelessness. This was calculated. This was Jake marking his territory, showing her what happened when scholarship kids forgot their place. The whisper campaign started next. Savannah Reed cheats. Heard she steals test answers. Someone saw her going through the teacher's desk. The rumors spread like oil slicks, poisoning every interaction. Study groups suddenly had no room for her. Lab partners requested transfers. Teachers who'd once praised her work now examined it with suspicious eyes. Heard you've been having some trouble, Jake had said one day, appearing at her locker like a bad penny. October sunshine streamed through the hallway windows, casting shadows that made his smile look like a sneer. Offer still stands. Actually, I'll make it better. $2,000 per assignment. And all this unpleasantness goes away. Are you recording this conversation? Savannah had asked innocently, pulling out her phone. Because I am. Hi, Jake. Please repeat your offer to pay me $2,000 per assignment to help you cheat. I want to make sure I have it clearly documented. His face had gone pale, then flushed. You little, careful, she'd warned. Threatening another student is grounds for suspension, even for legacy students, especially when it's recorded. He'd stalked away, but not before she caught the look in his eyes. She'd seen that look before, in nature documentaries, the look of a predator whose prey had just revealed unexpected claws. That night, her mother had worked a double shift at the hospital. Savannah had sat at their small kitchen table, laptop open to her essay on The Great Gatsby, and tried to ignore the dread settling in her stomach like cement. She'd won this round, but wars weren't won in single battles. Her phone had buzzed. Unknown number. She'd almost ignored it. But something made her answer. "Miss Reed." The voice was professional, clipped. "This is Dr. Morrison from the Preston Academy Scholarship Committee. We've received some concerning reports about your conduct. We'll need you to attend a review meeting next Monday at 4 p.m. The cement in her stomach turned to ice. "What kind of reports?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss details over the phone, but I should warn you that these are serious allegations. You may want to bring a parent or guardian." The line went dead. Savannah had stared at her phone, then at her essay. Gatsby believed in the green light, in the impossible dream of recapturing the past. But Savannah didn't have the luxury of dreams. She had a scholarship that could disappear with one committee vote. A mother who'd sacrificed everything to give her this chance. And an enemy with unlimited resources. She'd closed her laptop and pulled out a legal pad. If they wanted a fight, she'd give them one. But she'd fight smart. She'd fight with documentation and evidence and the kind of stubborn resilience that came from having everything to lose. Because that was the thing Jake Whitman didn't understand, would never understand. When you'd grown up with nothing, you learned that survival wasn't about playing fair. It was about playing smart. It was about turning their weapons against them. It was about remembering that sometimes. The only difference between David and Goliath was that David knew he couldn't afford to miss. The scholarship review meeting had been scheduled for 4 p.m. on a Monday. Savannah had spent the weekend preparing like it was a trial. She'd organized every piece of evidence emails from teachers praising her work before the Whisper campaign started. Time-stamped photos of her vandalized belongings. Recordings of conversations with school officials who'd dismissed her concerns. But her ace in the hole was something she'd discovered by accident. While researching the scholarship committee, members know your enemy. Her father had always said she'd found that Jake's father, William Whitman, sat on the board. Not just sat on it, he was the chairman. The same man whose insurance company had just pledged $2 million for the new athletic center. If this reminds you of someone who once held your future in their hands, someone who made you feel powerless, you weren't alone. You were never alone. Monday had arrived gray and humid, the kind of October day when the air felt thick enough to swim through. Savannah's mother had taken off work, losing a day's pay. They couldn't afford to accompany her. She'd worn her only suit, the one she saved for parent-teacher conferences and job interviews, and gripped Savannah's hand in the parking lot. "Whatever happens," she'd said, "I'm proud of you. You hear me? They can take away a scholarship, but they can't take away who you are." The conference room had been designed to intimidate. Dark wood paneling, portraits of distinguished alumni staring down from the walls. A table so polished you could see your own worried face reflected in it. 5 committee members sat on one side like a tribunal. On the other, just Savannah and her mother. Dr. Morrison had cleared his throat. "Miss Reed, we've received multiple reports of academic dishonesty. Specifically, that you've been soliciting payment from other students to complete their assignments." The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Savannah had felt her mother stiffen beside her. "That's a lie," Savannah had said calmly. "In fact, it's the exact opposite of what happened. I have here a recording of Jake Whitman offering to pay me. Recordings taken without consent are inadmissible." William Whitman had interrupted from his seat at the center of the table. He looked like an older version of his son, same cold eyes, same assumption of authority. "And frankly, Miss Reed, these accusations from my son suggest a pattern of attempted extortion. Florida is a one-party consent state, Savannah had replied. The recordings are perfectly legal, and interesting that you mention your son, Mr. Whitman, since you failed to recuse yourself from a meeting directly involving him. That's a rather significant conflict of interest, wouldn't you say? The room had gone very quiet. She'd pulled out her phone, placing it on the table. I have everything documented, every incident of harassment, every attempt to bribe me, every conversation with administrators who ignored my reports. Would you like me to play them for the committee? This is ridiculous. Another committee member had sputtered. A scholarship student making wild accusations against one of our finest, against someone whose father donated $2 million to this school, Savannah had interrupted. Yes, let's talk about that. Let's talk about how Jake Whitman's grades mysteriously improved junior year. Let's talk about how 3 teachers received anonymous donations to their classroom funds right around midterms. Let's talk about what finest really means at Preston Academy. William Whitman's face had turned an alarming shade of purple. You're walking on very dangerous ground, young lady. Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're the one on dangerous ground, using your position to threaten a minor, attempting to revoke a merit-based scholarship because your son couldn't buy his way to valedictorian. I wonder how that would play in the Miami Herald or on social media. Insurance CEO targets teenage girl who refused to help son cheat. Has a certain ring to it, doesn't it? Her mother had squeezed her hand under the table, part warning, part support. Dr. Morrison had shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps we should table this discussion until we can review all the evidence. No, Savannah had said firmly. We settle this today. Either you uphold my scholarship based on my perfect academic record and find these accusations baseless, or I walk out of here and go straight to the press, with recordings, with documentation, with everything. The committee members had exchanged glances. William Whitman had looked like he wanted to reach across the table and strangle her. But they all knew she had them. In their arrogance, they'd assumed a scholarship kid would fold under pressure. They'd never considered she might hit back. The committee finds no evidence of wrongdoing, Dr. Morrison had said stiffly. Your scholarship remains intact. This meeting is adjourned. Walking out of that room had felt like winning a battle. But as they reached the parking lot, Savannah had known the war was far from over. The Whitmans didn't lose. They just regrouped. You sure you know what you're doing, baby? Her mother had asked as they drove home in their ancient Honda Civic. No, Savannah had admitted. But I know what I'm not doing. I'm not letting them win. I'm not letting them turn me into someone who sells out for money. I'm not letting them prove that everyone has a price. That took guts in there. Your daddy would have been proud. But baby, her mother had paused at a red light, choosing her words carefully. People like that. They don't fight fair. They're going to come at you harder now. She'd been right. God, she'd been so right. The weeks following the scholarship committee meeting had been a special kind of hell. Jake had gotten smarter, more subtle. The harassment became psychological warfare. Savannah would find printed photos of her apartment building tucked into her textbooks, a reminder that he knew where she lived. Her mother started getting hang-up calls at work. Anonymous reports to Child Protective Services claimed neglect, forcing humiliating home visits. We know these reports are bogus, the social worker had said during the third visit, looking around their spotless apartment. But we have to investigate every claim. I'm sorry you're going through this." Through it all, Savannah had maintained her grades. She'd studied in empty classrooms, eaten lunch in the library, existed in self-imposed isolation rather than give them ammunition. She'd become a ghost, haunting her own life. Then came the class rankings, posted on a Friday in February, right before President's Day weekend. Savannah had known she was close to the top, but seeing it in black and white still made her heart stop. Number 1, Savannah Reed, 498 GPA. Number 2, Jake Whitman, 497 GPA, 1/100th of a point. The difference between weighted grades in AP Chemistry, her A+ to his A. The difference between valedictorian and salutatorian. The difference between Jake getting his Yale legacy admission and having to explain why he wasn't the very best. She'd stood in front of that bulletin board, feeling the eyes on her back, knowing that she'd just signed her own death warrant. Sure enough, Jake had appeared within minutes, his usual crew flanking him like bodyguards. "Congratulations," he'd said, voice dripping acid. "Enjoy it while it lasts." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise. See, here's what you don't understand. Reed, this isn't just about high school. This is about family legacy. My father went to Yale. His father went to Yale. I'm supposed to go to Yale. And you?" He'd stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne. "You're supposed to know your place. My place," Savannah had said quietly, "is at the top of that list. I earned it. Every decimal point." "We'll see about that." That weekend, everything had escalated. The principal had called her mother Sunday night. Voice grave. There had been an anonymous report about cheating. Someone claimed to have seen Savannah with advance copies of tests. The accusation was serious enough to warrant a full investigation. Her class rank would be frozen pending the outcome. "This is insane," her mother had raged, pacing their small living room. "You study 18 hours a day. When would you even have time to cheat?" But Savannah had understood. This wasn't about logic or truth. This was about power, about reminding her that merit meant nothing when the other side owned the game. She'd spent that sleepless Sunday night making a decision. She could fold transfer schools, protect herself, survive, or she could fight dirty, fight like someone who had nothing left to lose. Monday morning, she'd arrived at school with a plan. If Jake wanted to play with fire, she'd show him what it meant to get burned. The Preston Academy Excellence Assembly was scheduled for Thursday morning. 3 days for Savannah to prepare. 3 days to gather every piece of evidence she'd collected over months of harassment. 3 days to decide if she was really ready to burn it all down. Tuesday night, she'd sat at her kitchen table with Rebecca Lou, Jake's ex-girlfriend who'd reached out through Instagram with a simple message, "I have information you need." Rebecca was everything Savannah wasn't: designer clothes, perfect highlights, the kind of girl who belonged at Preston without question. But her hands shook as she pulled out her phone. "I dated Jake for 2 years, Rebecca had said quietly. "I thought I knew him. Thought the cruelty was just pressure from his dad. But then I heard what he was doing to you." She'd played a voice memo, Jake's voice. Casual and confident. "Dad's already handled the Yale thing, $30 million for the new library. And they'll take me even if I'm ranked 5th. But it's about principle. You know, can't let scholarship trash think they're better than us." When was this recorded? Last week. He was drunk at Bradley's party, bragging about how his dad was going to destroy you. And Marcus, Rebecca had paused, biting her lip. "Marcus Chen from IT Club told me something. They're testing a new security system Thursday. Every camera in the auditorium will be live, connected to the main display system. Savannah's pulse had quickened. Does Jake know? No, Marcus hates him too. Jake got his older brother expelled freshman year over nothing. Marcus said he's going to accidentally test the system during the assembly. Multiple angles, HD quality, everything recorded. It was almost too perfect. But Savannah had learned not to question gifts from the universe. Sometimes karma needed a little help. Wednesday had passed in a blur. Savannah had gone through the motions classes, lunch in the library, avoiding eye contact in the halls. But inside, she was preparing. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, a white dress her mother had bought for her academic awards dinner. White for innocence. White for visibility. White for cameras. Thursday morning dawned clear and bright. Savannah had stood in front of her bathroom mirror, applying waterproof mascara with steady hands. "You sure about this, baby?" her mother had asked from the doorway. "They want to humiliate me, Mom. Make me small. Make me run." She'd turned, chin raised. But Reed women don't run. The auditorium had been packed. 800 students. Faculty lining the walls. Parents in the back rows. The stage was set with flowers and the Preston Academy banner, "Excellence in all things." Savannah had taken her assigned seat in the honors section, front row where everyone could see her. Jake sat 3 seats over, relaxed and laughing with his friends. He'd caught her eye once, mimed drinking something, then winked. Principal Harrison had taken the podium, beginning his usual speech about Preston's tradition of excellence. Savannah had barely heard him. Her heart was pounding so hard she wondered if the microphones would pick it up. And now, for our Academic Achievement Awards. Would Savannah Reed please come to the stage to receive the Science Excellence Award? She'd stood slowly, smoothing her white dress. The walk to the stage felt like miles. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, could hear the whispers starting already. Jake's crew was positioned strategically, one by the stairs, 2 in the front row. Principal Harrison had handed her the award plaque, shaking her hand for the photo opportunity. "Congratulations, Miss Reed. Your dedication to academic excellence is inspiring." She'd turned to the microphone to give the expected thank you speech. That's when she'd seen Jake stand up, chocolate milk carton in hand. He'd moved with the confidence of someone who'd never faced consequences, walking down the aisle like he owned it. "Hey, Reed," he'd called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You forgot your lunch." Time had slowed. Savannah had seen his arm pull back, had calculated the arc, had made a choice. She could dodge. She could step aside and let the milk hit the flowers or the podium. But that wasn't the plan. That wasn't how you exposed a predator. She'd stood perfectly still. The chocolate milk had exploded across her white dress like a brown firework. Cold liquid splashed her face, her hair, her carefully chosen outfit. Gasps had rippled through the audience. Someone laughed nervous, shocked. Then another. Soon the laughter had spread like wildfire. But then the screens had flickered. Every display in the auditorium, usually showing the Preston logo, had suddenly burst to life with multiple camera angles. There was Jake, captured in perfect HD, his face twisted with cruel satisfaction as he threw the milk. There was Savannah, dignified even as chocolate dripped down her face. There was the horror on some faces, the glee on others, and there, in the corner of one screen, was Marcus Chen in the AV booth, his shocked expression Oscar-worthy as he frantically pushed buttons. The laughter had died instantly. Savannah had stepped to the microphone, milk still dripping from her hair. Her voice had been calm, clear, carrying through the silent auditorium. Thank you, Jake. You've just provided video evidence of assault in front of 800 witnesses, while being recorded from multiple angles. She'd paused, letting it sink in. My attorney will be thrilled. The auditorium had erupted. Teachers scrambling to restore order. Parents pulling out phones. Jake standing frozen, his face cycling through confusion, rage, and finally, fear. But Savannah wasn't done. She'd pulled her phone from her pocket, thankfully dry, and held it up. I've been recording every interaction with Jake Whitman for 6 months. Every threat, every bribe attempt, every incident of harassment. She'd looked directly at William Whitman, who'd risen from his seat in the parents section, including some very interesting conversations about buying influence at Yale. "Turn off those cameras!" William had roared. But it was too late. The footage was already being saved, already being shared, already beyond his control. That's when Rebecca Liu had stood up. "I have recordings too," she'd announced, voice shaking but determined. Conversations about bribing teachers, about destroying Savannah's scholarship, about how the Whitmans owned this school. The dominoes had started falling fast. Other students had stood up, pulling out phones, apparently. Savannah wasn't the only one who'd been documenting Jake's behavior. There was video of him keying cars in the parking lot, audio of him threatening freshmen, screenshots of messages where he bragged about getting students expelled. Principal Harrison had tried to regain control, but the assembly had devolved into chaos. Parents demanding answers, students sharing evidence, teachers looking shell-shocked as they realized how much had been happening under their noses. In the center of it all, Savannah had stood at the podium, chocolate milk drying on her ruined dress, holding her award plaque. She'd looked at Jake one last time. He'd sunk into his seat, face pale, finally understanding that money couldn't fix everything. The scholarship committee was right about one thing, she'd said into the microphone, cutting through the noise. There is a pattern of behavior here at Preston, just not the one they thought. She'd walked off the stage then, head high, leaving chocolate footprints behind her, in the bathroom. She'd washed her face and looked at herself in the mirror. The girl staring back wasn't a victim. She was a warrior who'd just won her biggest battle. The legal aftermath had moved with stunning speed. Within hours, #Milkgate scandal was trending. The video dubbed "The Milk Heard Round the World" by local news had gone viral. Everyone had an opinion. Op-eds about privilege and power. Think pieces about bullying in elite schools. Cable news debates about wealth and justice. Catherine Torres had taken the case pro bono after seeing the footage. "This isn't just assault," she'd explained at their first meeting. "This is a pattern of harassment designed to deprive you of educational opportunities. That's a federal civil rights violation." The Whitmans had tried to settle quietly at first. 50,000 and an NDA. Savannah had laughed. 100,000. She'd walked out of the meeting. 250,000. She'd started filing formal charges. The investigation had uncovered more than anyone expected. The anonymous donations to teachers, the manipulated grades, a whole network of parents buying their children's achievements. Jake's Yale admission letter, already signed and sealed before he'd even taken his SATs, had been the smoking gun. "How does 750,000 sound?" William Whitman's lawyer had finally asked. Defeated. Plus the scholarship fund, plus admission reforms, plus our client's withdrawal from Yale consideration. "It sounds like justice," Savannah had replied. Now, 6 years later, standing in that Miami law office with the check in her hand. Savannah thought about the girl in the chocolate-stained dress. The girl who'd refused to be bought, refused to be broken, refused to disappear. Her phone buzzed. A text from one of her mentees in the Reed Legal Defense Fund got into MIT full ride. "Thank you for showing me it was possible." Savannah smiled, tucking the check away. The money would help more students like her kids, who were brilliant but broke, ambitious but not connected, kids who needed someone to prove that the system could be beaten. The elevator reached the ground floor. As she walked through the marble lobby, her heels clicking confidently, she passed a wall of donors and patrons. The Whitman name was notably absent. Jake, last she'd heard, was working at a small insurance firm in Orlando, his Ivy League dreams as dead as his father's reputation. The FBI investigation had found enough financial crimes to keep William busy with lawyers for years. Outside, Miami's heat embraced her like an old friend. She had a meeting at MIT in 3 hours, a presentation about her new legal tech startup that helped students document harassment. From victim to victor to innovator. Not a bad arc for a girl from the wrong side of town, as she waited for her Uber. Savannah thought about that moment in the auditorium, the cold shock of chocolate milk, the hot burn of humiliation, the choice to stand still and let it happen, knowing it would be the key to everything. Sometimes, winning meant taking the hit. Sometimes. Justice came dressed in chocolate milk and waterproof mascara. Sometimes. The only way to beat the system was to make the system beat itself. Her driver pulled up a young woman who looked tired but determined. The kind of tired that came from working multiple jobs. The kind of determined that came from having no other choice. "Where to?" the driver asked. "The airport. But do you mind if we make a quick stop first?" "Sure. No problem." "Preston Academy. I need to drop something off." The drive was familiar, even after all these years. The neighborhoods still transformed like a timeline of American inequality. But now Savannah saw it differently, not as barriers, but as bridges she'd learned to cross. Preston Academy looked the same red brick, white columns, that perfect lawn. But the sign was different. Preston Academy, an equal opportunity institution. The Reed Scholarship Fund was listed prominently among the donors. Savannah got out of the car, walked to the gates, and pulled an envelope from her purse. Inside was a photo her in her chocolate-stained dress, standing at that podium, chin raised despite everything. On the back, she'd written, "For the next girl who refuses to know her place." She tucked it into the gate where a scared scholarship kid might find it. A reminder that David didn't always lose to Goliath. Sometimes, with enough documentation and the right lawyer. David won $750,000 and changed the whole game. "Everything okay?" the driver asked when she got back in. "Everything's perfect." As they drove away, Savannah saw a girl at the bus stop, cheap backpack, determined expression, that look of someone who didn't belong but was going anyway. Their eyes met for a moment. Savannah smiled and nodded. The girl nodded back, understanding passing between them without words. Reed women didn't run. They stood their ground, took the hit if necessary, and then they made sure the price for throwing that punch was higher than anyone imagined. The check in her purse wasn't just money. It was proof that sometimes the chocolate milk was worth it. The plane lifted off from Miami International, carrying Savannah toward her future. Below, the city sprawled in all its contradictions, wealth and poverty. Power and struggle, separation and possibility, somewhere down there. A girl was probably sitting in a Preston Academy classroom, facing her own Jake Whitman, making her own choice about whether to bend or break or stand. Savannah pulled out her phone and opened a new message to that girl. To all of them, your dignity is not negotiable. Your worth is not determined by their comfort. And sometimes, the greatest victory is simply refusing to disappear. She hit send, watching the message join millions of others in the digital universe, hoping it would find whoever needed it most. Reed women didn't just survive, they thrived.